everyone, it's Soraya Walters, and we're back with another episode of the Purposeful Professional Podcast, the podcast for the people, your career, and the culture. For this episode, I was honored to have a chat on this special guest journey through the finance realm and into entrepreneurship. Delroy Walters, our esteemed guest, dropped some serious gems on topics from financing your business and even regarding the many amazing things he's learned as an entrepreneur. If you envision starting a business as a part of your purposeful professional future, then this is the episode for you. Let's get going and take a listen. Okay, hello everyone. This is Soraya, the host of the Purposeful Professional. Super excited to announce that we are back for season 2. After a brief hiatus, we are back, and I'm really excited to have our first guest of the season, Delroy Walters, with me. Delroy, please introduce yourself to the people on the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm Delroy Walters. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of Inside Connect here based in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, that very brief, very succinct. I like that. Okay. We want to start off our next season, this new season, with a pop culture kind of segment, which we call Pop Purpose. And what we want to do is we want to ask you guys to weigh in on current events relevant to your expertise. I know you have like a really strong finance background and as well as a business background. So I really want you to weigh in on this particular topic, and I'm going to introduce it, and then you're going to tell me what you think. So recently, Taraji P. Henson, Golden Globe winning actress and star of Empire, Acrimony, and most recently, The Color Purple, opened up about the vast pay disparity between Caucasian and Black entertainers in the acting industry during her most recent press tour. While Taraji is an acclaimed actress, we know that pay disparities exist in every industry, with Black men earning 87 cents for each dollar a Caucasian man earns. This disparity is even worse for women of color. So my first question for you is, what can professionals of color do to navigate pay disparities in their industry? And how should they, if they should, negotiate their pay and or resolve this issue?
Great question. And take my hats off to Queen for disclosing where she was at and the pain that she was feeling. That's a running dialogue around the disparities in pay. And so one of the things that we can do as people as navigate some of this is to know up front what we're walking into and better negotiate ourselves. What is our self-worth, and how are we going to change that just going through the door? And so that will alleviate some of the pain points. I know it's Hollywood. I know that, these are roles. I know we need jobs, but we just have to self-evaluate ourselves and say, you know what, here's the pay. Is it something I want to do? Is it something I want to subject myself to? And if I can do something better or greater, then I'll look for that other source. But in her particular case, it's just unfortunate. That's just the roll of the dice and how Hollywood operates.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think I saw it. A lot of people saw it. And of course, It was trending on all socials. I mean, my Instagram feed was filled with it. My LinkedIn feed was filled with it. My Twitter feed was filled with it. Right. A lot of us weighed in because, unfortunately, what Taraji's going through represents all of us.
Yes, it does.
It represents all of us. So I really do like you're emphasizing like negotiating and understanding that this is a process. Even in Hollywood, it's a process to get what you're worth, and that you shouldn't go in any of these processes blind, but understand what's your dollar. Like what are you worth? What is your price? And I think that is a great way to go about it. So my second question for you is, have you ever faced a professional scenario where you were at the lower end of a pay disparity? And if so, how did you react to the situation? And what tips would you have for someone facing a similar scenario?
Absolutely. So yes, I have been on that end of the side of the equation, and I had to reassess where I was at, where I was trying to get to. What were the next steps for me? Whether to depart the organization, seek the opportunity that I was really wanting to go after. It's all difficult at the time as you're going through this, and sometimes it's a surprise to you. Somebody might slip up and say, I make that, and you go, what? I had no idea. I just had no idea this was going on around me, right? And so it's a tough situation to be in, but it all goes back to looking in the mirror, waking up in the mirror and saying, what am I worth? I'm worth much more than this. Go about to get it, and talk to people around you who are in a similar situation, because if you don't talk, you'll never know. Like if she didn't say anything, we would never know. what she was going through. And, so by talking to our peers about the situation, it can alleviate some of your own stress, but it also might open up a door and a window that someone says, hey, I know of another opportunity that might best suit your needs at this particular time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love how you're hinting to like salary transparency. Sometimes it
Yes.
happens in that random conversation of like, I make X amount and you're just like, wow, I make $30,000 less. I don't know if
Mm,
you saw the news about the Google spreadsheet that was released that saw the disparity in income between employees. So while there's this fight for pay transparency, there's also this downside when you realize that, hey, I'm at the lower end. But once
right.
again, you echoed going back to knowing who you are, knowing your worth, and I would say setting your rate and not settling. Setting your rate and not settling. And I think that especially as people of color, we tend to believe that there's no opportunities for us. If I don't take the lower end of the stick, who's gonna want me? Who's gonna want to hire me? But you know,
And you touch on such a valid point in the marketplace. We don't run Hollywood, right? So our big studios are
mhm,
here in Atlanta. Tyler has a huge studio. There are other people that have smaller type studios, but we need like 10 Tylers, right? We need across the
mhm,
nation that says, hey, if I can get it in Atlanta, I can get it in LA, I can get it in New York, and make sure that still happens. So as we look outwardly into the future, we have to say we need more Tyler Perry, we need more studios, we need more access to our people doing things like Ryan Coogler. If he's going to do the next Black Panther. What's his budget look like? And is he forcing the Hollywood's hands and saying, hey, I'm looking for A actors or B actors, and I need to make sure that they come in at this range. So it's a consistent dialogue that we have to have. I'm building this out, but you have to pay my people. This is just where we at right now.
absolutely. I completely agree. I think it. I mean, you're in Atlanta, so Tyler
Yeah,
Perry Studio. It's possible. It's possible. Like
it's
it's
possible.
possible for it to be. It's possible for it to be done. But the thing is, are we going to be strategic enough in understanding how to do it, how to execute it? These are all the things that I think about too. But I really did love the points that you have to make, and I 100% agree. So my
Yeah.
last question related to
Uh-huh.
this topic is how can marginalized communities, right? You're in entrepreneurship and finance, so I know that this is something that you think about, but like, how can marginalized communities build wealth and enjoy the financial prosperity in spite of the systemic barriers against them?
Great question. And one of the things that we're working here at Insight Connect on is to close the wealth gap. One of our primary reasons is to accelerate 10x for diverse supplies winning contracts. We're
Mhm.
always taught about, particularly around wealth, coming back from a Caribbean background like myself and yourself, is that, work for somebody, work hard for that individual, and stay there as long as possibly as you can. And that's the mantra that we've gotten. But we've realized that there are other ways. Our counter partners are doing it other ways too, and accelerating much faster. When you hear of a startup that's been out for 5 years and they have a huge exit, and then the founders became multimillionaires, you go, wait a minute, I had a similar idea, but I didn't know how to execute on it. And
Mm.
so we have to take our hats off and a little bit and move forward and say, you know what other things can I do? What kind of entrepreneurial ventures can I tackle? We got social media right now where you can get onto a podcast. You can, do a YouTube channel. There's so many different venues that we have to be privy to and open our eyes to. As that aspect is there's another lane. And being an entrepreneur, it's not easy. I will say it is not an easy to get up in the morning and go, gee, I got to dust myself off here, look forward and say, how am I going to push and scale this organization and making sure that I
Mhm.
get capital for it and making sure that people understand that the pain points around what I'm doing is valid. Like I give an example, there are 32 million small businesses designated with small business, but only 1% out of that is certified to go get contracts. And out of that 32 million, 25 million are from diverse suppliers that look like me and you. So if we're getting
Mhm.
1% out of 32 million, that tells us works need to be done. So we're rolling our sleeves up here at Insight Connect, and we're trying to work hard to bridge that wealth gap to make sure that if you're a contractor out there, if you're a diverse supplier, I should say, and you're looking for contracts, then we want to make sure that we're home for you. You can come here, you can get the resources around you to excel and get a 10x growth. But it's not easy. It is not
Mm.
easy, I will say. Not easy at all.
Nope, it's not. It's not. And I think this is such a great preface to your story, which we're going to get into. I think a lot of us don't understand fundamentally how this entrepreneurial economics works. And I
No.
think that a lot of us feel like you need a lot of money, because when we think of the guys or the women that are highlighted in Forbes and highlighted in these magazines, they are the ones, the Elon Musk and the Sarah
Right.
Blakeleys and the people who, oftentimes are white people. Just got to say it. This is a real space for me and my supporters. We talk about these things.
Right. Right.
And they have access to capital that we don't, and they might have a friend of a friend of a friend that we don't. But you're right, it can be a podcast, it can be a YouTube channel, it can be something smaller. And I think we have to think more about that and think about starting rather than thinking about the reasons not to start. So I love what you're doing at Inside Connect, and I
Thank
think
you.
it's going to inspire many diverse suppliers to understand there's a seat for me. Like, you're literally building seats that people will sit at.
Absolutely.
you know
Absolutely. Absolutely.
hmm
And also we're building the resources around him to be successful. I just don't want you to say, oh, by the way, he's got me opportunity to a contract. I want to make sure that the resources around you to be successful so you can go to the
yeah.
next opportunity and the next opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. You're building the chairs that will help people to pull up to the table, and I think that's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful
Absolutely.
analogy for the work you're doing at Inside Connect. And shout out to you and your wife for
Thank you.
doing that work and picking that up, because that's so important. So I want to get into your story. Yeah, Taraji, if you were listening, we have a lot of advice. Tyler Perry Studios, if y'all were listening, we need you to help other people to build
We
more
need your help.
studios.
Absolutely.
But I want to get into your story. So
Sure.
tell me about some of the professional roles you've worked in. Like, tell me, if you could give me a high level view of your career thus far,
Absolutely.
what would you
So
say?
I spent the bulk of my career in commercial lending. Some of the well-known banks, larger banks, and when you work for these large institutions, it's a fantastic platform to you to learn, right, and to make sure you're lending and get all the compliance and everything you need to know. But when I started to drill down in my career, I was realizing that I wasn't lending to my people enough, right? And when
Mm,
they got to the table, there were issues that I had to deal with, whether they're credit, whether they're balance sheet issues or P&Ls and that I had to clean up. But then you take a step further and you went like, so why is it that way? What is it about when you lending to a diverse audience that's challenged? Because you always hear like we can't find a capital because we have other things going on. And so, one of the changing points for me was a pivotal point, I should say, with me was I did a huge SBA deal and
mm,
closing that deal out. I literally, and I tell you, I made sure that the whole room looked like us,
mm,
from the closing attorney to everyone, champagne flowing in the room. Everything was us in the room, and we celebrated that night. I realized that I'd spent almost 9 months to close this deal, and it was for an individual who's a diverse supplier, who's a veteran in the United States, and it took him almost 10 years to get this opportunity, right? And I was the individual that made sure that he crossed the finish line. He got this multi-million-dollar loan. And then I looked around the room, and as I said, as I put the players all in the room, the realtor, the person that referred the deal, the closing attorney, himself, his family, when we were all celebrating, I realized at the end of the table, I was like, you know what? I did 9 months worth of work, and I got paid the least amount in the room.
mm,
And it was
mm.
a quiet, somber piece that came over me. We're like, wow, this commercial thing is a little different. I'd have to do 10 of these deals a year to really feel gratified. And I was like, wow, I wonder what this would look like if I worked for an institution, financial institution that looked like me, right? And had a boss like me and understood like me. And so it was a turning point. Like, I was on the wrong side of the table. I was on the right side of the table to give him what he needed to accelerate. I was on the wrong side of the table from a standpoint that I felt like I could have been the entrepreneur. I could have been his shoes and saying, yeah, I finally did it. Like I said,
Mm.
10 years of struggling to get this one opportunity that came up. Well, I was like, wow. So what if I never got there? Where would he be today? What other excuses? What other banks would have told him? And here's a guy that would have, I would say, bankroll at least 2 million in his account on a monthly basis. He had 2 million cash flow in his bank
Mm.
account monthly, and the banks were looking at him like, "That's cute. We'll take your money, but we're not going to lend you money."
Oh,
So
wow.
those are the type of challenges that I face. But the bulk of my career has been through lending and community development.
Yeah, that's just a great foundation. Like, I think I want to go a little deeper into some of the things and some of the themes that you talked about. So, number one, you're bringing up this thing of a lack of awareness sometimes that happens when it comes to what's available. But
Right.
also, like, the credit worthiness of certain founders. If he's having 2 million a year in cash flow, not 2 million a year, you said 2 million a month, I believe, right?
Months.
In
Yeah,
cash
monthly.
flow. Wow, that's that. I mean, how many? think of it this way: how many founders of color, how many founders from marginalized groups actually get to experience that success, especially back then? So I
Right.
think that it just shows you how there is so much discrimination and systemic issues
There is.
embedded within the credit worthiness system, like who is deserving of a loan or not. And I'm glad that you realized like you were the one in the room that made that happen, but you weren't given as well what you felt like you were worth. So
Absolutely.
all in all, like, what did you take from that situation? What are the lessons that you took from that SBA loan situation?
He wasn't aware of the programs. Nobody had mentioned a program to him, right? And so when an institution does an SBA loan, it's a partnership with a bank. So the bank will say, I will take 40% of the risk, and you'll take 60% of the risk. And so you split the risk down in the center. And so, he wasn't aware of that, and no one had ever approached him on that. Now, the other side of the equation is coming back from a Caribbean family. The old adage, we work 12 jobs, right? So we're always hustling, and we're entrepreneurs by nature. And that kind of fueled my gut. Like, I come from two generation of Walter's men that were entrepreneurs, right? And I always had that churn in the belly, and it was like, this is the wake up call. This is God saying, okay, wake up. If you're gonna step
Mm,
into your authentic self, you at some point have to do this. You
yeah,
can't escape it. You have to go out there and try, just like your forefathers did, or my father did, and his father did. And so, those are the kind of drum beats that I heard. Like when I left that meeting night, was like, there's something bigger out here for me, and I got to go get it. I really do have to go get it. So I thanked, and I still keep in touch with that borrower. We're still friends today. We still chat about how he got through there now, and I think his revenue size is about a $25 million organization in Washington, D.C. So he's grown immensely. I'm sure his cash flow is increased through his monthly deposits to his accounts. But, you know, to wait 10 years for that gratification, it's almost like that's a long time. That's a long
yeah,
time that the bank has
mm,
profited off of your, $2 million deposits on a monthly basis. So once again, for me, it's the wake up call. The drum beat said, "Come on, you got to do something about this, and you got to help others that are feeling this kind of pain." Also, he's not the only one feeling this pain. There are others very much similar like him that are feeling this pain, that need that push and need that information in their laps to say, "Here's another way how to get it done."
yeah, yeah. This is bringing me back to like the foundational economics that I think a lot of us have been shut out of learning and understanding,
Right.
especially the fact that, the SBA loan definitely played you could say an integral part of the business development moving forward, right? Because now he was able to grow and scale the organization
Right.
even further to what it's become today. So shout out to you for being that person to knock somebody on the head and say, hey, like this is
Thank
an
you.
opportunity. You can
Right.
grow, because I think we don't have enough conversations in our community, and in the work you do with Inside Connect, you probably have these conversations about growth. Some people don't want to grow. And I think that's reasonable. But I think a lot of it is that we don't know how to grow. We don't know that these
Right.
opportunities are available. We don't know that we can expand through, SBA loans and different forms. Even in a lot of circles, I think I would say a lot of founders don't even know what venture capital is. You talked a lot about the Caribbean background and the hustler mentality. I relate to that as well. I'm also Jamaican American.
Right.
But think it's one of those things where the hustle, from what I saw, and maybe you saw something a bit different, but from what I saw, the hustle was more of a sustenance business. Like, okay, we make money, and it's here to make money. It's here to pay for my lifestyle. But I'm not really thinking of building the next Facebook or the next Google or the next, a
Right.
large nonprofit or the next like really impactful organization. And not to say that those businesses aren't impactful, but it tends to be the same businesses, restaurants, a lot of service-based businesses. And I think for me, seeing that hustle and seeing how hard people worked, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My family's actually the opposite. But I do understand the entrepreneurial spirit of the Jamaican people and how a lot of
Right.
it came through survival, right? It was, we had to
Absolutely.
survive any way we could. But in that spirit of survival, there was a lack of focus on sometimes the longer term expansion and growth. So I could only imagine if more people, especially from that community, had a Delroy Walters in their ear, what would their business have become?
Working on it right now. Right. So I'll give you a
Yeah.
case. I'll give you a case in point. So here in Atlanta, I live in South Fulton, the city of South Fulton, and it's broken up into 7 districts. My particular district is the largest district, right? It has over 25 100,000 residences live in this district. There's not one bank here. There's not one financial officer that you can talk to or loan officers, nothing. And so I
Mm,
see disparities literally in my own community. There's affluence here, right? People do quite well, but the mainstream institutions are not here. And I wonder why. Like, what does it take? There's still this lack of information and how to access that information, right? Uh, Banks are now looking at what I'm seeing is that they'll leave behind an ATM machine for you to make a
mm,
deposit and withdraw, but there's no one to talk to. And in the oral dialogue, you get to learn something. Someone gets to encourage you, inspire you, or give you information, put in your hands and say, go home and read this. And here's what we can do with the next steps. And that's missing right now. So, this is
yeah.
one that's kind of push behind Inside Connect to saying, come on, we can do better as a people, but let's not just wait around. Let's not wait for somebody to change that, but let's go and get it ourselves. Let's go get that.
Yeah, and brings us back to what we were talking about at the beginning. That conversation is changing around. Why are we waiting for other people to see our worth? Why don't
Right.
we know it ourselves? And go out
Absolutely.
there and demand what we believe is ours. So yeah, I mean, when we think of Atlanta, we think of a lot of people will say Buckhead first. It's become a
Yeah.
mecca for Black excellence.
Definitely.
Every other day, I see a YouTube video of someone moving to Atlanta to embark on this career, that career,
Right.
become an influencer, entrepreneur, actor. Like it represents so much opportunity for so many people. But to hear that there's still this lack of financial literacy,
Right.
there's so many leaders who are doing the work as well, and I hope that they begin to focus on communities like your community and begin to integrate and really focus on that, because I think it's so necessary that we don't leave anywhere behind. Because I think sometimes people might see Atlanta as being very progressive, that they might forget about these little pockets that don't have, the access.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the quote, the Wakanda is the new Wakanda, as we quote,
Yeah.
here, right? And so it has work to be. We have work to do. There are a plethora of Black excellence entrepreneurs that are here. I'm part of. I'm a stakeholder at what's called RICE, and RICE is the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurship. And so, I was at a meeting the other night and the room was filled of entrepreneurs. You could feel the bubbling, the people, the churning, the messaging was on point. And it's like, I could see why companies want to come here. I could see why the gathering spot is here. HQ's out of here, right? And so
Mm,
I'm hoping that will spur other folks that have their success in their business to say, you know what, if I'm in the Midwest, I do okay. But if I came to Atlanta, I could really, put it into a rocket ship that can just launch off. And so, it's home to a really robust movement right now. And as we're in this space, I'm just happy that we can partake and be part of these discussions on the grassroots level to take it to the next level.
yeah, absolutely. So moving back into finance, I want to know, like, did you have any other transformative experience within the finance industry that
Oh
that
man,
changed your outlook on careers and maybe business moving forward?
absolutely. So I'll give you an example. I remember, never forgot this. I was closing a loan for a dental office, right, in Baltimore. So, I'm reviewing the financials, and I noticed in this financials, I keep on seeing that this repetitive, like, uh, real estate. Is a dentist. He has a large real estate holding. So I'm curious. I'm always asking the question. So at the closing table, I leaned over and said, "By the way, I'm very impressed by your financials." And he said, "Yes. Look," he said, "back in the '60s, my great grandfather came to this country, and he started a business in Baltimore and did quite well. But what he started to do early is to buy blocks of homes." I said, "Wait a minute. What do you mean buy blocks?" He goes, "He literally buy a street." And he ended up buying like
Mm,
about 5 streets, because back then in Baltimore, a home might cost you 5,000. So he ended up buying like 4 rows of streets. And I was like, gee, that explains why I keep on seeing these real estate homes. But what he said is that rent roll paid for everybody's education, paid for all the bar mitzvahs, paid for everything that he possibly can. And that through the generation, through the wills, it stipulated that if you wanted to sell off a unit or two, you had to get consensus from the village to do so, right? But
mm,
otherwise, this was a revenue generator that was set back in the '60s, and it's in full force today. So, that was an eye opener for me. Like, you have to put things in place for the next generation, right? That's going to generate capital and cash flow, and it has to be managed. And so they really managed it through the trust and through their wills. And I was quite impressed by that. very quite a bit. That was
Yeah.
a transformative moment for me. Like, man, I just didn't see that, and now I'm getting exposed to larger deals, more complex deals, but more importantly, I'm seeing people's financials, and I'm going, wow, this is deep. Didn't see
Yeah.
that.
I love the word
Right,
financials because I think a lot of the time I think some groups' inability to speak the language of generational wealth is directly
right,
tied to our inability to understand financials. Like we understand money, we understand what it's like to have money, we
right, right.
understand that, but we don't
That's
necessarily
it.
understand the complexities of it. And for this person to literally lay a foundation and say, okay, when the market is down and the real estate is cheap, I'm going to purchase it. I'm going to purchase it with the intention that when the market value goes up, there will be a cash return. There will be generational wealth built. There will be something that my future descendants can stand upon. That is the vision. Like that is
Yeah,
a vision.
yeah,
That is
and
a vision.
it is definitely a division because we're taught like, okay, your home ownership is great, right? So let's go out and buy a home, pay it off the home. The kids will have the home. They weren't thinking about just one house. They were thinking about the block. That was
Mm,
impressive to me. Like, I'm not just thinking about one or two, three homes. I'm buying actually rows of streets here. And knowing that, now my portfolio was like there's 30 homes. And you go, huh, I'm not taught that, right? We're not taught that. We're taught about, owning your home. We're not taught about
mhm,
what if you own 30 homes? And if you
mm,
own them for 30 years, there's no notes on these homes. You just pay the taxes on these homes. So every rent roll that comes into you, it's a bulk of it is capital to you, right? And how do you use that capital? Right? How are you furthering advancing your generation, the next generation? So I thought that was just a dope move on their behalf, but it gave me an insight looking at like, I got you. I understand now.
yeah. And it just stems from the fact that there's so many, I think like so many forward thinking people like yourself and so many forward thinking entrepreneurs that have the ability to, if this man was laying those seeds in 1960
Right,
for what's happening today in 2024, it just shows the power of having a forward thinking vision for what's
absolutely.
going to happen and the willingness to understand that the seeds that I plant today can become a tree. I love that because generational wealth is a tagline. Buying back the block is a tagline. Every other day I see buying back the block, generational wealth, breaking financial generational curses. And
Right.
I even was going to have a personal finance expert. Hopefully, we get her back for this
Okay.
season to talk about, first generation wealth building. And
Right.
these are all things that a lot of people think about. But I think that the way that the elders went about it was so practical. Like
Very much.
it wasn't like 10 steps to wealth. Like I think there's a whole industry being built around, I don't want to say giving bad advice, but
Right.
giving people advice that might not suit them. I think they had a unique ability to figure out what can I do with what I have. And
Right.
and that's something that I think is kind of missing in today's discourse. But that's a
Right.
great lesson. I love
And,
that
and,
you
it
learned
go-
that.
and it goes back to what I said earlier. We're taught that, work for somebody, stay
Mm.
with that one person for a very long time,
Woo!
right? You just can't run that advice. The average person might work about 15 jobs, right? They're bouncing
Mm.
here to here over the course of until they find the right spot. Or the entrepreneur minded and said, I bounced 3 or 4 locations. I got it now. I'm off to do my own thing. So the advice has to be to somebody. The younger generation has to kind of understand that to create generational wealth, the true straight line to get in is through entrepreneurship. If you look at those
Mm.
that you see, the Gates and whatever, they all started from an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't just wait
Yeah.
and work for these companies; they created these companies. And so
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing how the next generation will handle that, and to create, be innovators in their communities. Look at the landscape and saying what's missing, what problems can I solve, and go after it.
Mm.
Go after
Yeah.
it.
Wow. Everything. Speaking of that, you emphasize something that I think I heard a lot growing up. You grow up and you get a good job. And I want to
Yeah,
know,
good
my
job.
next question is, let's explore your childhood. Like, when did you realize you had this affinity and interest for finance and business and this entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at a young age, I remember my first summer working for my dad. My dad was into construction, right? And so he was like, "Hey, this summer you're gonna work for me." And I'm like, "Oh God, here I'm gonna work for my dad. It's gonna be rough, right?" But I was getting paid that summer. I made more money that summer than I did any other summer in my youth. But what I was watching my dad is they were rehabbing old buildings, and I was like, here they are getting this building out for some other guy or some other entity to come in, refurbish this building and sell it or put people back in it again. And so watching him in his enjoyment of to demolish and putting it back together, I wanted to see it from the financial end. You know, he was looking at the financial end. He was looking from a carpentry standpoint. Scope, I was looking at like, well, how much does this building cost? Was it a distressed building they got at nothing? So they're gutting the building, they hire people like my father's team, they come in, they demolish it, then they give them the contract to build it back up. And then at the end of completion, they go out and they get new tenants to come in the building, right? So what is the rent roll? It's like 30, it's a 30 unit facility. What's the rent roll? 30 units, right? And you kind of go, wait a minute, if they bought it to distress, they bought this building for $1 million to distress, flipped it. Now the building's worth $5 million upon completion. And it has a rent roll of all these 30 people. That person is really making out good. He gave my father the opportunity to have to work. But from a young step, I was looking like, I want to know more about the other end of this equation. Like, who's financing this stuff? How are banks moving this stuff? You know, who's privy to the listings that know that this building is just defunct and needs to be worked upon. And the majority of times, just like it is today, the people that came into our communities to build and rehab buildings look nothing like me and you. But they understood there was a business model that they could rinse and wash, constantly go back into the communities and say, you know what, I'll regenerate this building, I'll refurbish this building, I'll make it brand new again, and you pay me the XYZ cost. And so I still see that going on today. I'm still intrigued by the other side of the equation. I just don't see a lot of us on the other side making those kind of moves and transactions.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think your story exemplifies that there's this aspect of there's this skill. So a lot of, entrepreneurship specifically in the Black community was based on skills. I'm a carpenter, I'm a
Yeah,
barber, I'm a hairstylist, I can cook. There's this skill aspect. And usually the
right.
person that has the skill for doing the thing that creates the revenue isn't always the numbers person. And a lot of
Exactly.
times they're not the numbers person.
They're not.
So I think the form, basically the form that you and your father took, like working with each other and kind of like in a synergy, is something that I think a lot of
Right.
entrepreneurs need today. And I'll talk to founders because a lot of the work that I do is in the entrepreneur ecosystem, and they'll tell
Right.
me like, I'm good at this. I know the mental health. I know the algorithm. I'm great at this side. I'm great at the
Right.
product design. I'm great at the tech, but I'm just not good at the numbers. And
Right.
I think a lot of us are sometimes even afraid, even myself, to touch the numbers. I had to get myself into financial literacy courses as a whole college graduate because I was like, I need to learn. And I think that it's great that you had that fascination for that other side, because
Right.
I think that's contributed to your well-roundedness as a founder now, being able to not just speak the language of product development and business development, but also understand how that ultimately translates to the bottom line.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so, it's information. At the end of the day, it's information. It's just like we said before, halfway through this interview, is like VC. A lot of people don't understand the VC well, and we've, I would say, in the last 7, 8 years, opened up to people to understand. Oh, this is how the Microsofts have been developed. Oh, this is how this company got off the ground. Oh, what would it look like if I started a company? How would it? How would I learn the ins and outs? And so, growing up, it was Silicon Valley. It was like the going to see the Oz, like that was the place. It only happened in Silicon Valley. That's where all the money took place. You had to move to California, sell an idea, grow that business, scale it. But it was like, well, who's all moving to California? Cost of living is
Mm,
expensive. Is someone gonna, if I pick up from Atlanta, go to Silicon Valley, someone gonna look at me and go, really, you moved here for this opportunity? And they go, I'm not sure I want to lend to you, or make sure, yeah, I give you capital to scale your business. And so, over the last couple of years, we've seen like the Fairless Fund and other institutions that have changed the
hmm
course of that, right? And put us into a much more mainstream conversation about what it is to be and seek a VC out. What are some of the problems we're solving? What are some of the solutions we're providing? And how big is the problem? What I'm consistently hearing now is like, I don't want you to solve this little problem. I want you to solve a real big problem, right? And so, inside Connect, we know for a fact our problem, the solution we have to this problem is mega. It's been around for over 50
hmm
years, and contractors, diverse contractors, are still not getting their just due. And we're challenged with other things that are moving around us, DEI conversations about it could possibly go away, right? And so you got to be diligent. You got to be ready to hit that conversation, or ready to pitch an investor to say, I see the need, and here's why you should see the need also, and join me on this journey.
Yeah, you're highlighting a lot of things that I want the listeners to like pay attention to, the gems that
Right, right,
Delroy is dropping. I just think number one, what you said about understanding that is so important. Understanding VC and understanding that system is so important, because for some people it is the path for them. But I also think the emphasis on the big problem is huge. I think sometimes certain types of entrepreneurship, the return isn't always as apparent at the beginning.
Right.
I don't know if you heard of the founder of Calendly. His story has went all over the place. I mean, that guy literally built Calendly for, I think, 12 years and struggled to raise. I think they said he raised 500K maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And it's like, whoa, but he kept it alive for that long because he understood, if I play the long game, if I play the long game with a VC backed company, I can become a billionaire off of one valuation, which is exactly what happened to him. I think
I will say he's here in Atlanta. He's in Wakanda. So
wow.
He's queued out of Atlanta. Yeah.
Yeah, he did say he's because I know he's from Nigeria and he said Lagos, Atlanta. Okay. Yes, I read his story. And I think it's an amazing story. And I can think of the Zoom having which we're on right now. We're on Zoom right now. Zoom having a similar trajectory as well. COVID just taking the company public. Things like that can happen. Things like that can happen when you build a VC-backed firm. And I think I always think of the fact that when you're solving a big problem, you got to play the long game.
Yeah, you have to. For example, like I said to you before, the 32 million or 1% of the 32 million are certified in small business. But the other side of the equation looks like, corporate spend after the passing of unfortunate time of George Floyd. Large corporate has said that they're going to put aside $50 billion spend for diverse suppliers over the next 10 years, right?
Okay.
Well, if we're at 1%, then it's my goal and my team's goal here to make sure we get, not just people get certified. I want people to think, oh, it's just certified, I get the contract. We're putting them around an ecosystem that's going to help and provide them the services they need to scale that. And that's the long-term game, because I want us as a people, all the diverse suppliers of access to $50 billion. But I want to look beyond that, right? I want them to look and say, you know what? It'd be nice if I was managing a 50 million revenue size business a year. That's growth. That's wealth. That's what you can leave behind for someone growing up. Yeah.
Wow. Woo. This is going to be one of the ones. No, this is going to be one of the ones because you're just dropping gems. But I want to go into that transition from finance to entrepreneurship. And I think you balance both, but for a lot of people, that jump is hard. So for my next question, I know you eventually transitioned from finance to entrepreneurship. When did you know it was time to make that leap? And then what tips would you have for people who are on the stable, sometimes high revenue path or high, salary path of finance, but are considering entrepreneurship?
No, that's a great question. And so for me, as I said to you before, at a closing table in a celebratory event, watching another brother receive this multi-million contract, I was elated for him. But it also, I heard the drum beat in me like, you could do this. You have to go to get this done. And so that was the birth of me realizing, like, it's my father's dreams, right? My father was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur in my DNA, and I was masking it, right? I wasn't being authentic to who I was and we needed to be. And so understanding that, there's always the underserved that need a champion. And there are a plethora of problems within our society that I think if entrepreneurs could look around and say, you know what, that's not there. I can solve that problem. And then have the fortitude to be around a group of other people that says, you know what, I'll help you solve that problem. I can be a team to get to that problem, because sometimes you're not going to get there by yourself, right? You're going to need that village to lift you up and say, come on, you can do this. It can be done. I mean, look at Pinky Cole with Slutty Vegan here, right? She graduated, right? Came in with a truck, turned it around to $100 million brand evaluation. But it's the drive in her, right? Talking about the Caribbean drive, right? It's the drive.
Yeah.
And she puts herself around the resources in the right community, and all of a sudden she is where she is, right? And so I'm a firm believer in that there are a plethora of opportunities around us. We just have to get up in the morning and seek them out.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Pinky Cole is a legend. I swear. First of all, I love her. I think that what she's been able to do in food, especially bring veganism to a community that was very, outside of Rastafarian circles, people wasn't really sweating veganism like that. No. For those who know. And she made it okay. She made it kind of cool for Black people to be vegan. And even not just Black people, but everyone who felt like, I'm vegan, but I'm also hood, or I'm vegan, but I'm also, this type of person, they feel represented. And I think that's powerful.
I'll share a story. So I was at the location last year. Somebody visited from out of town. I took them there, right? And they were like, "Man, I'm waiting for this long line." We went inside. Where you from? Boston. They yelled, "Boston!" First time. And we're having fun, right? As we proceeded to leave the restaurant, right across the street, there's a white restaurant, and I saw
Mm,
people sitting on across the street eating at another establishment, saying, "We're so happy that she's here because not only is she bringing business to herself, she's bringing business to the other restaurants that are around them." And I'm like, wow,
mm,
I didn't think like that. I
yeah.
was like, wow, so I'm assuming she's bringing this powerful force in veganism to us, but she's also, moving the other businesses around her, and they're getting a growth off their business just to do to her business. So kudos to my girl. That's how you get it done. That's the Jamaican spirit. We all rise
Yeah.
and we do right, right?
I want to talk about that, and that it's funny that you said Pinky Cole, but I
Right,
also want to talk a little bit more and add my perspective on what you said about entrepreneurship. I think that you're right. It's about authenticity. It's about
right.
being authentic to your path. For some people, it's in their blood. It's in your blood to be an entrepreneur. You come
It
from
is.
that family, that lineage. For other people like me, not necessarily your blood, but it is the love that I have for it, the desire that I had for it that pushed me forward. So
Right.
I think you're right. It's authenticity, and we have to start somewhere. But speaking about that Caribbean heritage, you've spoken a lot about it, and I saved it for this part of the interview because I think it's so meaningful. So I know that there have been cultural and familial influences that have grounded you and greatly influenced your path. How would you say your Jamaican heritage has shaped your approach to work, entrepreneurship, and life?
That's a great question. Being raised in, as you know, inside of a Jamaican household, there's this stern hand that you guides you through through the process, and but more importantly, you're not there by yourself. You got family members, you got cousins, so you get to be in this ecosystem that, like, I get to see others doing it. And for me, it was the pattern was I have my father was the 12. He was the eldest out of 12 siblings, so I get to see my aunts and uncles all hustling from Canada, from
Mm,
Jamaica to Ghana, right, from England.
mm,
So I get to see this international play now and go, man, we all are doing in different areas and different facets of what we're doing. But for me, what the driving force was spending time with my dad and sitting down and listening to the stories like, your grandfather did this, right? He started this. You can do something. I've done something. We made a living out of this, and you can make a living out of it. But look beyond just making a living out of it. Play the long game. What's the long game, right? And
mm,
so the message I have to other people, other entrepreneurs, is out. Look at the long game. What is your 20-year plan? How are you going to
mm.
solve this problem? And if you
Ooh.
solve that problem, and you have an exit, great. Solve the next problem. Keep on going. Just don't be satisfied. Keep on going.
Yeah, I think you, Pinky Cole, I can think of so many entrepreneurs from a Jamaican background. It gives you that relentless drive. It gives you that
There you
relentless
go. There you go.
determination.
There you
And
go.
I think it's because so many of us grow up seeing family members create something out of nothing.
Out of nothing.
And we understand what's possible.
Right.
And I think there's so many sayings. I'm not good at speaking in Patois on the podcast,
Oh, super
but
power. Come on.
no, but there's so many sayings that speak that directly speak to the resilience of the Jamaican
Right.
people. And if I would say there's anything that I think in a lot of when I look at you, Pinky Cole, like a lot of Jamaican or Jamaican American entrepreneurs, I see that resilience because
Right.
what people don't realize is behind the success there were failures. Some people are just relentless, like they're never going to give up, they're never going to get off of it. And I think
Absolutely.
there's this element of the Jamaican culture where whatever you are, really be the best of it. Excellence is really the standard. I mean, for
Right.
a country to have so many achievements across, food,
It's
music,
music,
sport,
sports. You're right.
and even then we have many wealthy people come out of Jamaica as well. So
Lots.
business,
Right.
and it to be such a small island, there's so much talent, there's so much versatility to the Jamaican spirit, and I think I really love seeing
Right.
Jamaican American and Jamaican entrepreneurs. My dream is to meet Pinky Cole and interview her because I follow her all the time, but it's because she's on fire. Like, and I see that Caribbean spirit. She's on
Yeah.
fire. And I
Yes.
see that passion that she has. And it's just something that I think is so special. So thank you for sharing that
Not a
with
problem.
me and for sharing that with the listeners, because I think that's so special. All right. So what would I say? You dropped a lot of gems today. There were a lot of gems dropped. And I think this was a really also very, very impactful conversation. So I want to focus on where you are today. today you're the chief growth officer of Inside Connect. Like, what would you say is the best part of playing such an integral role in a fast growing startup?
Yeah, for me, it's all about relationships. I'm a relationship guy, right? And partnerships. And so, just for the example of the night, uh, meeting folks from UPS that are looking to have conversations with me, looking at a CDFI located here in Atlanta and having a conversation with them, like what I'm working on. They're like, call me. We need to talk more about that. I like what you're doing. And I could see a possible partnership there. Looking at, I had a Bank of America rep there, pulled me aside and was like, we need to talk. I hear what you're doing. I understand exactly what you're trying to do is I want to partner with you.
Mm,
I want to get on that early bus ride with you to get you there. So for me, it's the joy is connecting with people, connecting with other suppliers that hear their pain. Like I was listening to a young man the other day. I tell you, he was wailing like, "Yo, I need help. Like I want to win I don't want to win one contract. I want to win 15 contracts." I could feel his
mm,
hunger, and he didn't know the vehicle. I said, "I'm working on the vehicle to get you there." And so I have a discovery call coming up with him pretty soon. And so for me,
mm.
it's always about listening. You have, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, stay locked in to your customer base. Understand their needs. Don't walk away saying I got it. But once you say you got it, you don't have it. Somebody else will take it because they're tuned and locked in to what your customers need. And that might change from month to month, year to year, but you have to be locked in. You got to be so lockstep with your customers, understanding, feeling their pain. So when you provide them the solution, they say, thank you. Thank you. You were listening to me. You weren't just brushing me off. So staying in lockstep, for me, being in that relationship space and mode is key for me in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that facts. Truthful. Truthful. I feel like everything you said is just 100%. It's about staying in that position to understand
Right.
what your customers need, because that's ultimately
Right.
why you have customers is why you have business, you know? So it's about
Bottom line.
understanding.
Right.
It's
Right.
about understanding what they need. And I think that one of the questions that I love for you to ask, because I hear this all the time, how do you deal with competing voices in entrepreneurship? You have investors saying one thing, you have customers saying another, and then you have your team saying another. Like, what do you prioritize, and how do you prioritize making decisions? Because I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur.
Great question. And so you got to be truthful for yourself. You know your business better than anybody else. So an investor might think one way and say, take it that way, but they're not in your shoes, right? You know your business better than anyone else. And as your team, you consistently are pushing, striving, having deeper conversations with your team to say, we got to listen, right? This isn't just for today. We're putting this out for the long term and having consistent arguments, disagreements, till we get to the victory part of it and say, we understood why we did that. We understood why we challenged each other in that space. But for entrepreneurs out there, that if you do are blessed to have VC backing, and a VC says, I think you could take it this way, you know your business better than anybody else. It's your ride. They're along for the ride to help you grow and scale and use them in that capacity because they're going to help you, right? But it's the client, you're living, breathing this solution every single day, and never forget that.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that. I think that's a great wisdom, that it's like, not to say that investors don't have a voice. They do.
They have a
But I
voice.
think
No, yeah, you have to have a voice.
we've seen the VC and unicorn, and we've also seen VC and birth a lot of the time, because the founders and the founding team is trying to please the investors. And I'm
Right.
sure you've heard stories of that.
Yes.
I would say, like you said, the investor only knows what they've seen. They're not running your exact company. So they've seen maybe similar firms. They can say, I see the market going this way. But a huge part of it is like, they're going based off of historical data even to make these sort of
Right.
decisions. If you're
Right.
coming with something new and innovative, which most founders are, don't expect to be fully understood. You know, you need enough understanding to get the check, but
Right.
you don't
Right.
need
Right. Right.
understanding to
And
follow
you're
VC to
seeking,
every decision.
you want a partner, right? So the investor,
Hmm.
look at them as a partner. Don't look at them as just strictly as an investor. How can you lean on them and saying, hey, you have
Yeah.
additional resources that I don't have access to. Let's explore
Mm,
the opportunity, right? And so use them as a partnership. They're invested into you, but they believe in you, right? And so
yeah.
you gotta invest back into them and say, hey, look, I'm giving you the time to be investing here, and I want you're on my cap table. But how can we work this mutual agreement between both of us, right? That I know
Hmm.
you have resources that possibly might open up another door for me, and let's explore that opportunity. But you have to be in the driver's seat to have that dialogue with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. see them as a resource, see them as a partner. Exactly. And I think that's a
Absolutely.
really healthy way to see them. Okay, so we are now at the end of our conversation, and we have our concluding question, our concluding
Yes.
concluding question. So this podcast is called The Purposeful Professional, and just as an aside, I started this podcast to chronicle some of the journeys and the wisdom that so many of the amazing people that I know have. And I always say we have two types of people on this podcast. We have the seekers like myself. We're young, we just started, we're seeking our path. But we have
Right.
the teachers. We have those who can dish out the wisdom, can teach us things, can show us things. So, Delroy, I think you are a teacher. I think you are a
Okay.
master teacher. And you gave us a master class in entrepreneurship. They're going to have to run this one back. Like, we're going to use this one for a lot of time because you gave us a master class in entrepreneurship. And I'm very grateful for that. So, for my
Thank you.
last question, I think your life and your story are so inspirational to me. And I know the listeners will definitely be encouraged, but I want this one question to be answered by you. What makes you a purposeful professional, and how can we embrace purpose in our own careers?
Wonderful closing question, and a profoundly deep one too. And so, purposeful is you have to wake up at the 6 a.m. hour and feel the drive, and know that by
Mm,
6 p.m. I'm not exhausted yet. Right, I'm going to push until maybe 9 p.m. I still have to get all the things done around me. But purposeful for me, the drive is knowing the satisfaction that I'm assisting somebody that needs my assistance. As I always tell my team this, there's people waiting for us. Our solution
mm,
is proud, waking up in the morning saying, I need this help, and we're providing that solution. So being purposeful for me is understanding the marketplace, understanding that the customer's needs, but more importantly, understanding I can connect with them. I understand this story. I understand why they get up and drive hours or two for work. I understand all the things that the drivers for them, the drivers for me also. But purposefully for me is I challenge myself, and I want to make sure that I provide something, a solution that not only is just for today, but far exceeds when I'm left this place, that they'll say that opportunity gave me something that no one else gave me, just like that borrower did in DC when he got that loan. He had waited for 10 years for that loan until I came onto the scene and finally got the SBA loan he needed.
yeah. Wow. Wow. I'm just like mouth drop moment because I think you're embodying in your story and what you just said generational wealth and generational movement. We
Absolutely.
do this for those coming after us. And like you said, we do this for those who are waiting on us. I'm spiritual. And one of the biggest things that I believe is that there's a void in the earth that we were designed to uniquely fill. And I think that your
Absolutely.
life and your career definitely embody that. And I'm grateful for that advice because as a young entrepreneur currently in the strugglepreneur phase that you've probably been familiar with, just began
Absolutely.
to hire
Absolutely.
a team, just began to really build out the team and stuff, and it's getting hard. I think that I can turn to interviews like this, and I know that there's so many people who are going to be encouraged. So thank you, Delroy. Really appreciate it. This is the end of this episode of The Purposeful Professional. Yes, and we will be back next week. All right, y'all. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Wow, wow, wow. This was a transformative conversation. I even feel richer listening to its content, like my net worth went up or something. From our insights on Taraji P. Henson and knowing our worth, to the powerful ways we can harness motivation for the entrepreneurial journey, I don't know about you, but my cup is full. This conversation has inspired me to chase my dreams as a Black entrepreneur and to know that a real life Wakanda can exist, and in fact, that we have the power to create it. Special thanks to Delroy for an engaging and spirited conversation, one that is likely to have an impact far beyond the episode's content. All right, everyone, this is Soraya from the Purposeful Professional Podcast, the podcast for your career, the people, and the culture. We're out. Until next time.